Hey Health Junkies, Dr. Krause here. Just wanted to jump in and let you know about a new feature that I'm adding to the podcast. It's the ability to ask me questions. I've had a ton of folks tell me that they would love for me to cover their questions on the podcast, so I'm going to do it. So each week I will be adding a couple of questions that I'm going to answer to each of the podcasts. And if it's a juicy enough question, I just may dedicate a whole podcast to it. So if you're interested in asking a question, head on over to my website at drjkrausend.com. Check out a blue button on the right-hand side that says Ask a Podcast Question. Hit me up there. Or you can also access the button through my podcast notes, also on my website. So head on over there, ask me some questions. I look forward to answering them soon. All right, let's get on with the podcast.
Hey, Health Junkies! It's time for The Health Fix. Join your host, Dr. Janine Krause, as she gives you a dose of what you need to know and do right now to take control of your health from the inside out, to rebel against aging, look damn good, fight stress, and laugh every day.
Hello there, Health Junkies. Welcome to another episode of The Health Fix. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause, and today's episode is all about why can't I stop eating at night? Or for some people, from afternoon on, why can't I stop eating? Why can't I stop thinking about food? Why can't I stop obsessing about food? Well, the good news is that you're not crazy. There are physiological and emotional issues at play. And it's a little bit of sleuthing to figure out which one it is, or it could be both. So let's kind of break it down a little bit here. It's a very common phenomenon for folks to kind of go on the hunt for food a couple hours after lunch. And for some people, it's right after lunch. Maybe it's that candy dish in the office, and you all know who has a stash of candy in their drawers. Don't act like you don't, because I know who's got the stash, and I know where the stash is in my office. So there's that. Or maybe it's the vending machine starts to call your name. Or maybe you start to think about what you have in your cabinet at home, and you start to dream about how amazing it's going to be to get that bite of something in your mouth. Like, for example, me, I sometimes think about chocolate, or I'll sometimes think about, oh my goodness, pretty much anything that might be lingering in my house, especially if there's been a party and we have leftovers, or if my dad's in town and I have made him some delicious zucchini bread or something of that nature. If there's any of that left, you better believe that I am sometimes going to be thinking about that. And sometimes if it's a really bad day, I'm really going to be thinking about it. So if this happens to you, you're definitely not alone. And I hear this a lot from patients too. And it's crazy because you're literally, you kind of become obsessed with this, and you get home, or maybe it's something that you know is at the store and you're having a craving for it. And you're like, I've got to get to the store. I've got to get that. And then I'm going to get home and I'm going to go for it. Or you're like, can't wait to rip it open and get it in your hand as fast as possible. Well, yep, these things are common. And usually it's related to some sort of imbalance in serotonin and dopamine. And in particular, that afternoon craving component is very, very linked to serotonin levels decreasing. Now, interestingly enough, cortisol decreases after 2 p.m. in the afternoon as well, because the body drops off on cortisol because we use cortisol to lowering to put us to sleep. We use elevated cortisol to wake us up. So pair that natural process with a stressful day that might have caused us to have spikes and drops in cortisol, and pair that with a, let's say, need for some serotonin to help us feel cool and chill and calm. But also serotonin develops into melatonin, which puts us to sleep. And so if you have issues with sleeping and you're having issues with craving food in the afternoon, you likely have low serotonin. And one of the ways to know if you have low serotonin, of course, is going and getting a neurotransmitter test. And if you've listened to any of my previous podcasts, I've talked about urine. You can use urine testing by a company called Labrix or ZRT Labs. And you can get a ZRT lab kit on your own online, or you could go through a doc to get your Labrix kit, and you can test your neurotransmitters to see if indeed they are low. Now, what I've also found, though, is that sometimes in the afternoon, we will have low serotonin levels, but folks don't end up with low results in the test. And so that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, because serotonin levels can fluctuate. But if they're constantly low, and that's something that I think it's important to know, this could be something that you'll want to deal with and manage, in addition to looking specifically at the afternoon, because maybe you're hungry all day long, or maybe you have trouble stopping eating at breakfast even. So that would be something to look into in terms of serotonin, because serotonin's job is to actually help us to feel full and satiated, satisfied. And if we don't feel full, satiated, or satisfied, we've got an issue. So let me pose this to you. Has it ever happened to you that you've got home from work and you literally ravaged through your whole kitchen to the point where you are in the back, deepest, darkest depths of your pantry, and you're finding stale rice crackers or stale crackers? And the reason I say rice crackers is because that's what you would find in my pantry. They're like way in the back. They taste like cardboard, and they've probably been in there for like 3 months because for some reason I left 3 of them in there, and that's what happened. Yeah, and then you rifle through those and you eat those, and then you try to find anything else that's really ridiculous, and you like lay out this whole smorgasbord of random foods similar to what you would do if you came home from a party drunk at 2 a.m. Yeah, if you know what I'm talking about here, likely we need to work on your stress management and some serotonin and dopamine. So I mentioned a lot about serotonin, but I didn't talk as much about dopamine. Dopamine is our neurochemical that helps us to connect with people, to feel connection to the world, to feel connection to others, to have a good libido, to be motivated to do things in life. And so it's kind of that if we don't have it, we become lazy and apathetic. And if we don't have serotonin, we become anxious and irritable and hungry all the time. And so you put 2 deficiencies together and you get a real crazy amount of cravings and need to connect with others. So the reason I'm mentioning serotonin and dopamine is that serotonin, oftentimes low levels of serotonin tend to be linked more with the true 2 p.m. to, like, let's say till you get home to have dinner, need to eat something to satisfy that craving. And the dopamine being low is that almost more of the emotional need for connection, for something. And we try to work to satisfy that craving, and they both end up being that we crave random foods. So, unfortunately, most of us have probably gone through that whole episode of where someone takes over you. Basically, it's like you become on autopilot and you eat through your whole pantry random foods, and you still can't seem to get satisfied. And this is a terrible thing, because we're eating 4 times probably or more as much as we would normally eat. And then we're like, okay, I didn't get what I needed. And likely it's because it's either a physiological or emotional need that you can't necessarily fix by eating certain foods. Now, another big thing that is an issue is that we've got a lot of folks who, when they have a episode of dying to eat something, they might be on a paleo diet, they might be on a keto diet. And so a ketosis diet being the high fat diet, the paleo diet being a lot more high protein, or you could say low carb, and so more high protein, high fat diet. Well, unfortunately, when you eat a lot of protein, your body and your brain in particular is going to take all of those amino acids from the protein and shunt them up to the brain. And what's going to happen is we're not going to get sufficient amounts of tryptophan, meaning the amino acid. So tryptophan is an amino acid precursor to serotonin, to help us feel satisfied and shut off that food craving. So unfortunately, a lot of us connect tryptophan, the precursor to serotonin, with turkey dinner. So we all think about Thanksgiving and feeling full and satisfied and lethargic and watching football with, oh, I just got a huge tryptophan hit. Well, guess what? That's not actually the way it works, because all of those receptors, when you eat protein, all of those receptors that take up your amino acids are going to take other amino acids first besides the tryptophan, which leads to serotonin, and the tyrosine, which leads to dopamine. And so unfortunately, eating a lot of high protein foods or following a high protein, low carb diet or a high fat, low carb diet, you're not going to be able to get the amino acids that you need to your brain to feel good. So I'm going to challenge you with an interesting thought process here. And I honestly admit that until recently, I didn't really figure this connection out. I actually had to experience it myself to be like, oh crap, I've been telling people wrong about how to get tryptophan into their body and how to help with cravings. My thought was that you could get the amino acids that you need, tyrosine and tryptophan, for dopamine and serotonin respectively, into your brain via eating high protein diet. Not so, because your receptors in your brain for those amino acids get overloaded by eating protein and you don't get them in at the rate you need them. And so let me back up a little bit here to kind of see where things went wrong and how I figured it out. I was on a very low protein, so not low protein, very low carbohydrate diet for about 3 years. And in that time, I was stressed, very stressed with work and life and things of that nature. And I was probably eating somewhere around 50 to 75 carbs a day, which is by no means ketosis, but it is a low carbohydrate diet when I look at what I eat now. And what I started to find out is that in the evening, after a stressful day at work, I wanted to come home and rip the daylights out of my kitchen and find something to satisfy my hunger. And I would go through beef jerky. I would go through like all these high protein things. I was eating lunch meats. I was eating, turkey lunch meat, of course. And I was eating turkey itself or roasted chicken and going through all of these protein items. I was also going through lots of nuts and seeds and still not finding satisfaction. Well, when I was diving into trying to figure out what was going on, I found a resource, which is a book that has to do with connecting with serotonin and a serotonin-based type of diet, a way to boost your serotonin. And what I found in this book was that I was missing out completely on allowing the amino acids tryptophan and tyrosine in particular, so the dopamine and serotonin, to be able to get to my brain. Because I was eating so much protein and so much good fat, I wasn't getting the right quantities of tryptophan and tyrosine by themselves so that the body could kind of suck it up and get it into the brain faster. Now, this is an interesting concept for a lot of people because most people are really convinced, like I just said before, so was I, that you have to eat protein to get amino acids into your system to boost your serotonin. Not so. You actually can get sufficient amounts of tryptophan and tyrosine into your body by eating about 25 to 30 grams of a whole foods-based carb. Now, I'm not talking about going and getting a bunch of chips. I'm talking about things like beets, carrots, other types of roasted vegetables. Eating these alone about 3 hours after your lunch, eating them 3 hours after whatever, maybe lunch is your first meal, whatever it may be, just 3 hours after a meal, as long as it's in that 2 to 5 p.m. time frame, so eating it as your mid-afternoon snack, turns out to actually help put the kibosh on your crazy afternoon cravings and overeating, because you're actually boosting serotonin levels, and that can blunt your appetite. Now, I'm going to step back for a second because a lot of people are going, what? Just eating carbs by themselves? But you've always said eat carbs and protein together for balancing blood sugar. That's true. And that is true for meals. But if you're struggling with overeating and you're struggling with being able to feel satisfied in the evening, it might be worth it to try a snack that is just a carbohydrate and a whole foods based carbohydrate. Like I said before, I'm not talking about chips. I'm not talking about popcorn. I'm not talking about something snacky. I'm talking about a carbohydrate that is a real deal food and something that is closest to nature. Another example would be a cup of cooked oats. A lot of us eat oatmeal for breakfast, which isn't horrible, but I am starting to find that if you have more protein and protein and good fat in the morning or your first meal, and for lunch, if you eat 3 meals, I'm not a huge proponent of making people eat breakfast, but if you do have in the beginning half of your eating for the day, a good meal that's higher in protein and good fat, maybe has some carbs, but it's higher in protein and fat, and then you have a carbohydrate snack between 2 and 5 p.m., about 3 hours away from your last meal, you'll find that you're not going to be turning into a monster either when you get home or if you work at home. This is a way to balance things too. You just feel a lot more satisfied. So I was talking about the cup of cooked oats. You could do a cup and a half of cooked rice. That boosts serotonin and dopamine. Chocolate, dark chocolate in particular. The reason that a lot of us crave chocolate is because it does boost both serotonin and dopamine. And it takes about 2 ounces of it to do it, but it can do it. Now, dark chocolate has, depending on what brand you get, there is going to be some sugar added. There is going to be fat in there. But in chocolate, there's not a lot of protein. And so it's not going to have that interference effect. Cacao nibs, 1.5 ounces of those is a great option if you're not wanting the sugar from the dark chocolate. And cacao nibs, just like dark chocolate, boosts serotonin and dopamine, which I find pretty darn cool. Beets in particular, 1.5 cups of beets will boost serotonin and dopamine. Now, you might be wondering, where is she getting this from? The book I was mentioning was Serotonin Power Diet, and it's from Judith Wortman and Nina Fruchtager. I cannot say her last name, but look up Serotonin Power Diet. It's interesting, and I'll put it in the resources too. They also have a website, bebrainfit.com. It's pretty cool in terms of the information there on helping with boosting serotonin levels and doing it properly. Now, the same concept goes along with folks who are struggling with adrenal fatigue. So you've stressed yourself out, you're super stressed out. A lot of times when you're super stressed out, it tends to happen that I find that people are on ketosis and ketosis or a high protein diet. And then all of a sudden they hit a wall and they're craving carbs like crazy and they can't stop and they don't know what to do. Well, likely it is because you're not getting enough serotonin. Your body isn't producing enough, or you're not absorbing the nutrients enough to get that serotonin boost. And interestingly enough, we're starting to see that all of the adrenal fatigue diets, the ways to help to correct the adrenals, is talking a lot about afternoon carbohydrates. And I'm really finding in myself and in my patients that having this little hit of whole foods-based carbohydrate between 2 and 5 p.m. really does take the edge off the crazy. And if you've ever experienced like ravaging through your kitchen, trying to become satisfied, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is just like this inner monster, this primal need to find whatever it is that you're looking for. And unfortunately, it's usually something that you can't tangibly get a hold of because it's either not in your house, you don't have those good whole foods based carbs sitting there ready to be ripped open into, or it's an emotional need that you are not getting satisfied. So what's the deal? What's wrong with you? What's happening here? I'm going to talk about how I see things and how I've helped people to balance this out, and how I've helped even my own self to balance this out, because I have struggled with emotional eating and overeating my whole life. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. So this physiological and emotional reason for overeating, there's 2 major types. So the physiological needs, so that's number 1. This is like a big umbrella in terms of need for why you are overeating. A lot of times it's, like I said before, the serotonin and dopamine need, but it's replenishing from the day. Maybe you didn't eat enough earlier in the day. I know way too many people that eat like birds during the day and then they load up at night. And I don't think that's necessarily a great idea, because you eat so much at night, your belly's full, your body's got to figure out what to do with all those nutrients. And a lot of times your receptors get overloaded and you're not going to absorb all that food. Plus, overeating at night, chances are most of us that are overeating at night are eating way more than our digestive enzymes can handle. And if you're over 30, you are missing some of your digestive enzymes. You just don't make as much as you used to when you were younger. And so your body can't even break down all the food you're piling into it. And I really, truly believe that most of the issue we have with our digestive systems today is that we overeat. And the overeating is messing with our gut health. The other biggie is not having good gut bug balance. A lot of us have too much yeast on our gut lining. A lot of us have a lot of non-beneficial bacteria. So we need to help with that balance. Another biggie that we have going on is leaky gut. And I'm sure probably for a lot of you who have listened to my podcast over and over again, you're like, yeah, leaky gut, okay. Well, honest to goodness, it is a big issue. Those cells separate apart, you get these molecules of food into your bloodstream, and then your body's got to deal with all those molecules of food that you should be using for nutrition, and instead they're just floating around in your bloodstream, sitting around for your body to create an inflammatory reaction. Anytime we have inflammation in the body, it's going to inflame the brain. We're not going to have our brain functioning properly. And now we've got another issue with not having our physiological needs met in terms of getting nutrition to the brain, but then also inflammation in the brain causes mood swings and all kinds of other mood disorders and issues with balance of serotonin and dopamine. Now, another biggie that is kind of a secondary reaction to leaky gut is food sensitivities. Because the more food that you get across into the bloodstream and your body is treating it like it's a virus or bacteria because those little molecules shouldn't be in your bloodstream, well, now you're going to have your immune system hijacked and very busy. And when your immune system's very busy, it irritates the brain because you're going to have lots of histamines being produced. And so this is another thing that can happen to compound the overeating, searching for some sort of calm from the food. So something to keep in mind. So another biggie is the more need your body has for B vitamins when you're stressed out. You also go through a lot of your neurochemicals. You blow through tryptophan, so the amino acid tryptophan that we use to make serotonin, we blow through a lot of that because we have more of a need for melatonin to help us to sleep and recover from stress. We also blow through tyrosine because tyrosine is the precursor to our fight or flight, so our adrenaline hormones. And so we blow through these, and if we don't have these to help us feel satiated because we're using it because we're stressed out, now we have a bigger issue. And we're also blowing through lots of nutrients and needing to recover, and we're not doing that either. So lots of issues along with stress, overeating, and gaining weight. And the reason being is because there's this bad negative feedback loop that happens that when we aren't digesting properly and absorbing the nutrients we need and getting enough of them replenished, when we're stressed, we end up muscle wasting. So we're using our own muscles for amino acids. So we break down our own muscle to create energy and to repair our body. And at the same time, we're putting on fat because the body's convinced that we're starving. So each time that you're stressed, you go home, you overeat, you eat a ton of nutrients. So concept is overfed, undernourished, and I've got a podcast all about it. You eat a ton, but you don't use those nutrients, unfortunately. And so this is a bigger issue in terms of signaling to the brain. And quite often I describe this as broken brain syndrome because the stress causes your brain to not react properly and signal you to eat more when in fact you don't need any more. You need to break down your food better. So there you have it. Now, one of the big components here, like I was talking about before, is stress. Stress is related directly to the amount of cortisol that you produce. We should have higher amounts of cortisol in the morning, and then it should slowly taper down from 10 o'clock in the morning down at 2 p.m. That's when it really takes a good dive, and that's when most people feel tired. They want to pick me up. They start craving foods after about 2 p.m. It's also when, like I said before, our serotonin levels start to go down. And remember, serotonin is that keeping us feel good, not anxious, calm, collected. And so for a lot of people at that 2 to 5 p.m. time frame, their go-to is something sugary. Maybe it's a sugar hit at Starbucks with one of those liquid sugar drinks, or maybe it is the candy jar. Now, the problem with quick sugar, like straight up refined sugar, is that it's going to boost your blood sugar. It's going to boost serotonin temporarily, and then it's going to drop it really hard and fast, and you're going to be into another cycle of it. This is why slower release carbs are useful. The other cool thing about these slower release carbs is that they have more nutrients in them than your average Snickers bar. Now, don't get me wrong, Snickers, delicious. And you might be like those commercials where they show a completely different person until they get their Snickers bar. Well, think of it as, all right, a little more natural Snickers bar. Maybe you need something that you bring from home to work at that 2 to 5 p.m. time frame, somewhere 3 hours away from that prior meal, especially any meal with protein, and you just try to get in 25 to 30 grams of a very good carb. Now, here's the caveat with it. You need to wait. So you eat that carb that's got about 25 to 30 grams of carb in it, and you wait about 20 to 40 minutes for it to take effect. This allows for the body to suck up all that tryptophan and tyrosine in that food and help to boost the serotonin and dopamine. The reason being, waiting that time frame, you eat your little food and you call it good. The reason you want to wait is because there's no competition for other receptors in the brain. Most of us, if we're in a eating binge or a feeding frenzy, as I call it, or a snacksident, you're pretty much like, okay, I'm going to eat this first, then I go to that, then I go to this, then I go to that. One thing, wait. Get some tea, do some breathing exercises, go back to work, take a walk, something to chill you out. Stay away from the kitchen, stay away from the candy jar, all those different things, and see how you feel. Now, like anything, it's a habit. It takes 21 days to form a habit. That's what research shows. I would agree with that. A lot of our sugar craving components and our junk food craving components are habits that we've created too. And so in addition to a physiological need to boost serotonin and dopamine, we also have a habit that we've created and an emotional connection to that habit. Getting up and walking around the office to go to the candy jar, say hi to Judy, walk back around to your desk. You know what I'm talking about. It's a habit. And so changing that habit. And typically the way I work to change habits in this case is go back to fundamental fun and enjoyment in life. Another big reason that we struggle with overeating is emotional needs. And so this is umbrella number 2 in terms of the 2 umbrellas, physiological needs and emotional needs that are causing our overeating. So emotional needs, habits. A lot of us need habits. We all are creatures of habit. We like to do things in a particular sequence, whether we joke and say we're OCD or not. We all do have a tendency of it. And the reason being is because we do things because they make us feel a certain way. People smoke because they feel a certain way from smoking. People drink alcohol because they feel a certain way from drinking. People eat sugar because they feel good for a moment. It's the same kind of thing. But we also need to explore that connection. Are we not getting enough attention from someone that we desire attention from? Do we not make connections? Are we having trouble making connections with friends, with just society in general? Are we missing out on feeling the love from others, from folks in our workplace, from our partner, from kids, from whatever it may be? And these issues are very connected to signs of low dopamine, because our dopamine will rise when we get attention, when we have a connection with someone. And it doesn't have to be a connection like a love connection. I'm just talking about smiling at somebody across the street. That can help with your with your dopamine. It's incredible. Check out my next podcast, by the way, because I'm going to talk all about making connections with others. That's simple and easy to do to boost your dopamine in the day. Another big need is like connection, human connection in terms of touch. Whether it's a pat on the arm, whether it's a hug, whether it's cuddling, whether it's just something in terms of fun. A lot of us are stressed out because we forgot how to be kids. We want to be kids. We're all kids on the inside. We want to have fun. And when life is not fun, we turn into monsters. Just think of the movie The Shining if you have ever seen that. If you haven't seen it, if you're too young to know what that movie is, go Google it. Jack Nicholson has a line in there that says, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." And his face that he makes when he says it, that is every single person I've ever seen that needs some joy and fun in their life. A lot of us think that we can't have fun every single day. You can. You have to just sit down and go, okay, what would be my best day ever? And I've talked about this over and over again in my podcast. And there is a resource as to how to evaluate your best day ever on my podcast, on my website at drjkrausend.com. Head on over to the resources page and you'll find that best day ever section. And literally incorporate little fun things in your day. A lot of us have an emotional need for creativity. And when we're not creative, we start to overeat and use food to help with our feelings. Unfortunately, food and feeling issues start in childhood. Mine did. I unfortunately learned that food is love. And if I wasn't getting love, I would just go get food and give myself some love. I am an only child. And I was lonely a lot. My parents were older. They both worked. My grandma was kind of my go-to person in terms of my babysitter as a kid. And my grandmother was a wonderful Polish grandma. If I was not cold, I was freaking hungry. And so her love was like food, food, food. Oh my gosh. To this day, any type of cookies and any type of pastries, I'm like, love, I love pastries. It's like the light comes on, my life just, it's like a lotus flower opening up. I'm like, food. It's kind of a nightmare. I love pastries, love them. Did I tell you guys that? Yeah, love them. So that's how I cope with things. I look for sweet foods. I want pastries. I want things of that nature. And oddly enough, the university, so Vanderbilt University did a research study and put it down in terms of a full resource for their patients in terms of what cravings that you have, what kind of emotion you're feeling. So check this out. If you're craving salty, you might be bored. If you're craving crunchy, you might be angry or frustrated. If you're craving spicy foods, you're excited about something. And if you're craving sweets, you're joyful or you're content. Well, okay. So if I'm craving sweets, I might be joyful because I can see how that would happen. But a lot of times it's like I need something. And usually when we're looking at an emotional need, a lot of people stuff down their emotional feelings with food. I am like the queen of that. And I'm working on it. And I think for anyone that struggles with overeating and dealing with emotional needs, one of the big things to think about is to love on yourself. Do not hate yourself for food binges and snack accidents, because they happen. Someone hijacks your brain. It's definitely not you. Someone hijacks your brain, takes over, and then all of a sudden you go nuts and you eat more than you can ever imagine that you could ever stuff in your little stomach. And that's okay. It's all okay. It's just now that you know that that's what's happening, time to figure out what are your triggers, what is causing this desire to stuff down emotions with food. And so looking into it is huge. And sometimes it's super scary, but it's something to think about. So right now you might be thinking, okay, I don't know if I'm an emotional eater. I don't know if I'm a physiological overeater. I don't know what I am. So one of the things to think about, thanks to Vanderbilt University, is that they kind of broke it down for us. And so I'm going to use their resource. So physiological hunger is basically gradually increase, and you can forget about it. Whereas the emotional side, you don't forget about it. Back to physiological, it can be satisfied. That hunger, you can stop eating. You don't overeat. Physiological hunger, you don't have guilt afterwards. Emotional hunger is sudden. It's urgent. You have a need for a specific food and you're not satisfied until you find that. And sometimes you don't get satisfied. Usually emotional eating is associated, not usually, always, it's associated with guilt, shame, and embarrassment after each episode. And emotional eating, we eat more when we're stressed, you eat when you're not hungry, or you just keep eating even though you have messages to your brain I'm full. And you're like, screw it, I'm eating more because I haven't got what I wanted yet. It hasn't hit me yet. Emotional eating, you eat to calm and soothe. When you're sad, you're mad, you're bored. Another emotional eating component is rewarding yourself with food. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Another emotional eating component is eating until you're really uncomfortable quite often, and you feel powerless around food. You feel out of control around food. One of the things that I've struggled with my whole life is the reward with food. Like I said before, my grandmother was a wonderful Polish lady, but anytime I came home from school, oh, you had such a great day. You did so good. Let me see your homework. Oh, good job. Here's a cookie. Oh, you did great in swimming. Here's a cookie. All the time. Cookie, cookie, cookie. And so when I get older, right, I'm going to go, and this is what happens to me. I'm like, oh, I made it through the day. I need chocolate. Oh, I made it through the day. Now I need wine. Oh, I made it through the day. I need this or that. It's crazy. And it's reinforced quite often. I mean, when I was on swim team, when I played softball, where did we go after games? Even if we lost, we went to Dairy Queen because that's how you get your reward. Yay, you did great. The other big issue is that social events are so circled around eating. You go out with your friends, you eat, you're stressed out. Your friends are like, hey, can I bring you some food? Hey, can I take you out to eat? It's crazy. It's hard. It's difficult. Now, going through this, I've mentioned a lot about dopamine and serotonin. And you might be thinking, I don't know if I have low dopamine. I don't know if I have low serotonin. What are the symptoms? Symptoms of low dopamine. Addictive behavior. You cannot feel pleasure. You're apathetic. You don't care what happens to you. You don't care what happens in the universe. You have a low libido. Your motivation is low. You might have mood swings. You might be happy. You might be sad. You might be, who knows, any minute. You might be one or the other or something different. Kind of Jekyll and Hyde stuff. You might have memory loss, fatigue. You can't connect with others, have difficulty connecting with others. Finding love, things of that nature are difficult. Procrastination. You procrastinate. You can't sleep. You feel hopeless. You can't concentrate. Completing tasks is difficult. Or you might be engaging in self-destructive behavior. And I just recently came into contact with a patient with extremely low dopamine, and her destructive behavior was to work out to boost her endorphins because she was getting the adrenaline hit from it. And keep in mind that to make dopamine, you have to go through the pathway to the end point. You convert dopamine into adrenaline. And literally, she was going through the whole process. She was like, if I could start out my day jumping off a cliff, like doing cliff jumping, she's like, I totally would. I would feel so much better then. And I was thinking it being a completely broken neurological processing, but it hit me when I went, oh my gosh, this is low dopamine. So if you know anyone that it seems like they're taking risky behaviors, but they're not that kind of person, they're just needing that hit of energy. They keep calling it energy. They want the energy, they want the endorphin release. A lot of times it's dopamine. So keep that in mind. That might be you. Low serotonin. Low serotonin signs are depression, anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome. So it could be constipation, it could be diarrhea. A lot of serotonin issues going along with that. PMS, hormone dysfunctions also related to serotonin. Fibromyalgia, so that is chronic pain issues. Muscle pain, OCD, obsessive compulsive, aka OCD, eating disorders, obesity, alcohol abuse, and migraines. I have a lot of patients with migraines, PMS issues, irritable bowel, depression, anxiety. Serotonin. So now that you have all the symptoms, you know kind of what's going down here, what do you do about it? Well, one of the most important things to keep in mind is that it all goes back to getting in the nutrients that you need. Because all of our issues fundamentally come from an imbalance. And that's the basis of this. Now, granted, we have the fundamental basis of the nutrients, but at the same time, we have that emotional connection here. Overeating most of the time is not purely fundamental in terms of nutrients. So I guess I kind of misspoke a little bit there. It is fundamental. Okay, I'm saying this back and forth, all kind of awkward like. Fundamentally, you're not absorbing your nutrients. If you have emotional connection and eating stuff, it's usually that things started in childhood and they're kind of combined, compounding each other. but there usually is a connection with not getting enough nutrients in. Okay, there we go. All right, so big thing first is keeping your blood sugar balanced during the day. A lot of us start out the day eating crappy cereal or like drinking a triple macchiato latte thingy dealy. Obviously, you can tell I don't drink coffee. Embarrassing. But drinking something that's like liquid sugar, or you're eating an energy bar that's really just a cereal bar with a bunch of sugar in it, you got to be doing the protein, good fat, veggie carb kind of thing. That's whole foods, eating as clean as possible, eating closest to nature, and making sure that you are eating balanced when you do eat. Now, I'm not the type of person to say that you have to have breakfast. I just think that when you eat, you make sure that your meal is balanced. So like I said before, protein, like 4 ounces of protein if you're a lady, kind of palm size, and guys, 6 ounces, so the whole hand size. Good fat, good tablespoon or so, teaspoon to tablespoon of fat, and veggie carb. And by that, I mean like getting in like zucchini, getting in something like some green leafies, something in that case to get your carbohydrate going, but not making your first meal of the day like a big carb bomb, like going and having a box. Yeah, you could do that. You're having a box of Chex cereal or something. I don't know. But the idea is just not doing the cereal thing. Save cereal for, I don't know what. Don't eat cereal. That's my... All right. So there you have it. Now, when you're getting into your last meal of the day, so dinner for most folks there, the idea is to really have a little bit more of carbohydrates. This is when I add in a sweet potato. This is when I add in a little bit more butternut squash, something of that nature where you're getting 30 to 50 grams of carbs with that dinner. And the idea here is that if you have a little bit more carbohydrate with dinner and a little less of protein and good fat, and what I'm saying is we're offsetting more carb and little less fat. So it could be 4 ounces of your protein, or it could be like 3 ounces of protein. And the fat could be, instead of a tablespoon, maybe like a teaspoon of an oil or something of that nature. Just kind of offsetting a little bit, because the idea here is that if you have more carbs with dinner, you're going to be able to keep that serotonin going to help to make melatonin, because serotonin turns into melatonin and helps you to sleep. Now, of course, the overeating component, like we talked before, that's that snack somewhere before your last meal of the day and 3 hours away from your previous meal. Sorry, this is kind of confusing. I have a resource. You can go to my website, drjkrausend.com. That'll outline how to do this step by step. And the idea with this snack between 2 and 5 p.m., this is the 25 to 35 grams of a carb. And like I said, root veggies, you can bake them, you can roast them, beets, something of that nature, yummy stuff. Or you could do rice, 1.5 cups of cooked rice. You could do 1 cup of cooked oats. Now, not plain. I mean, you can doctor it up, put some nuts in there. Just don't dump like protein powder in there. Just don't do a lot of protein. A little fat's fine, just not a lot of protein. You could do cacao nibs, you could do dark chocolate. Now, another interesting component here is happy hour, because happy hour happens to be oftentimes between 3 and 6 or 3 and 5. A lot of us, when we're stressed out, we go with our work buddies to happy hour. Happy hour is probably the worst thing you could possibly do if you have an overeating issue, because alcohol is going to lower your serotonin. And if you lower serotonin, you're going to lower serotonin's appetite suppressing effects. All of us know that have drank alcohol at any given time what happens when you're done drinking. If you come home at 2 a.m, what do? It's like pizza, whatever chips I have in the house, you finish it. Duh, that's what happens. But if you take that into effect, when you go out and have happy hour, usually there's happy hour snacks that are going to be on sale, and you're like, sweet. If you're like me, you're like, ooh, look, I would normally pay $8 for this, and now it's $4 on happy hour. Ooh, I want to try that. Well, usually those foods are not your best choices either, and then you end up overeating because you drink. There you go. So, happy hour. Typically what I like to do for happy hour is I'll do my little snack of carb, and then I go for a walk. Go play with the dog. Do something to go and detox from the day, to relax. I call it the 5-minute detox from the day. A lot of times I'll go and foam roll, I'll stretch, pet the dog, just anything to not sit there and sit in my kitchen and mow on food. Another biggie that you want to make sure you're doing is drinking enough water. You need at least, and this is super minimal, half your weight in ounces of water a day. Ideally, for most people, it's like 64 or more ounces a day. Just put a check into that. And keep in mind that coffee dehydrates you, so you need to replace, if you have a 12-ounce latte, you need 12 ounces of water extra to replace that, which you are going to lose from drinking coffee. Another biggie is making sure that your dinner is at least 40 minutes after your carb snack. So like I said before, that carb snack to ward off that trying to feel satisfied component, you want to make sure that that dinner is at least 40 minutes after, because it takes about 20 to 40 minutes for your receptors to get that serotonin hit and get things going for you. So be able to suck up the tryptophan and boost your serotonin levels. Keep in mind that when you eat, you got to chew your food. You do not want to be multitasking. You want to put your leftovers away before you even plate your own food. Because if you leave those leftovers out, you're going to circle back to them. That's how it happens. That's how it works. You want to put your dishes right away in the sink, dishwasher, whatever, and then get the heck out of the kitchen. The longer you sit in the kitchen, the more you're going to think about certain foods. Hands down, biggest problem ever is hanging and lingering in the kitchen too long. All right, like I mentioned before, it takes about 21 days to form a habit. So you gotta work on doing your carb feed, as I call it, after work, between that 2 and 5 o'clock time frame. And it doesn't have to be after work, because I know that some people work till 5. So between 2 and 5, give yourself the carb, then go home, detox from the day, and then have your dinner and go about life. Don't forget to be kind to yourself. Think about every day as the best day ever and having fun. You need some creativity. You need a creative outlet, because a lot of us, our emotional component is not only the need to connect with others and have our needs met, but also being creative and having fun. So keep that in mind. Get on the search for fun, that pursuit of happiness. Go for it. Find your inner kiddo. What does your inner kiddo want to do? And try to incorporate fun every single day. Another biggie. Having cut up veggies and root vegetables and things of that nature that have been cooked at home on standby. So if you didn't bring it to work, you get home, you can grab it. Because unfortunately, veggies don't wash themselves and cut themselves up. And that's a problem, because anything we can open up, rip our hands, rip open and dig our hand into really fast is what's going to go into the mouth fastest. So making sure that you've got your whole foods ready to go and that you're not buying junk food and having them sit around. It's a nightmare. Just don't bring it in the house. The last but most important thing in the universe is, if you have kiddos, if you have partners, if you have friends, roommates, etc., really make sure that you have a good connection with this individual in terms of being able to talk with them about the needs that you have, because we all have needs. A lot of us are scared to express our needs because we feel ashamed of them. We feel like, oh, I should be strong and not have to ask for these things. Or you imagine that the other person has superpowers and they can imagine what you need. Oh my goodness. If you are married, I will tell you this. Your husband or your partner, in my case, my husband, he can't read my mind. I wish he could, but he can't. He has no idea. And so I have to tell him what I need. And ladies, I'm going to tell you that as advice if you're married to a guy or a girl, whatever. We have to communicate with the partner in terms of our needs. We can't just sit there and imagine that they know exactly what you need. You have to tell them. And shockingly enough, when you talk to them, they are pretty receptive. And if you get really frustrated coming home from work and the sink is exploding with overflowing dishes, and that makes you mad, and so you want to go eat and get stressed out because no one helps you and nothing works right in your house, and why do you have to do everything? You know who I'm talking about here. I've had that feeling. I do everything in this house. No one helps me. Yeah, if you have that feeling, you have to express it. You got to express your needs. You can't stuff it down with food. So express your needs. Go give your dog a hug if you have a dog. If your dog isn't a lover, that's okay. Just pat the doggy on the head and maybe take him for a walk, because at least you get some fun and some exercise out of it. But the bottom line here is work on getting your emotional needs met. Don't be a snot about it. Just talk about it. It's amazing how being outward and open about your needs can open up a lot of great communication. So I challenge you to trying that out, see how it goes. I would love to hear how it goes for you in the comment section on my podcast and on my website at drjkrausend.com. Once again, you've survived another episode of The Health Fix. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Kraus. Have a wonderful day. Do your best day ever, every day, and just live it up. Have some fun. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to The Health Fix, the podcast all about taking control of your health, rebelling against aging, and having fun every day. A lot of patients ask me, do you think I'm aging too fast? So, I created an evaluation checklist for you to see for yourself. Plus, I created a resource guide to help you slow down the aging process right now. You can find it for free on my website, drjkrausnd.com. If you like this podcast, help get the word out to others by liking it and rating it. If you'd like more natural health tips and want to join our Facebook community where I interact daily, click on the Join Group button on our website at drjkrausnd.com.